Are you in the process of building an overlanding truck? Stop. Before you go any further, I wanted to talk a little bit about everything I've tried over the last 7, 8, 9 years that I have changed from. And I want to talk a little bit to you guys about those different setups. I want to talk specifically about the pros and cons of each of those setups. And the reason for this is because, again, a lot of the questions that I see online, a lot of the things that you guys are asking is, why'd you go with a rooftop tent and a bed rack? Why didn't you go with a cap? Why'd you go with this? Why'd you go with that? So if you want to hear more about my setups that I've had and kind of where I've gone and why, and the pros and cons of each, stay tuned.
Understand where it came from, but you got it, my got it. It began in the land of the sandstorm. I fought it, though I wanted everything to do with what you gave to me. Loosening my grip.
All right, guys, so as I mentioned in the intro today, I'm talking about all the different types of setups that you can do for overlanding and kind of the benefits, the pros and cons of each, which ones I've tried, and why I switched away from them. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm standing in front of my 2023 Nissan Frontier Pro 4X that has a bed rack setup with a rooftop tent, a built-in drawer system with a refrigerator, and a dual battery system. That is basically the gist of what I'm running right now. And again, we're going to go back in time to the beginning when I first started this thing in about 2016, 2017. I bought a Nissan Xterra, and I'm going to start there and I'm going to run through all my setups that I've had since the beginning through today. And at the end of each setup, I'm going to go through pros and cons, and I'm going to talk about why I went away from each setup to the one that I'm currently at. I am getting ready to make a big change to this one, so I will end with that, with kind of my final, after all these years and all these things I've learned and all the types of trips that I've taken, where do I want to go and why at the end of this episode, so make sure you listen till the end. All right, so going back in time, like I said, to the beginning of when I started overlanding and kind of found out about what this whole thing called overlanding was, I went out and I bought a Nissan Xterra. I'm a Nissan guy. I've had a number of Nissan vehicles. They were very budget priced, especially in like the mid 2000 teens, right? I actually found an 05 with about 94,000 miles for $7,000. So it was a heck of a pickup, really super reliable truck. I put about 55,000 miles on it in the next 5 years or so, and it was still running great, but it needed a lot of work on suspension, bearings, that kind of thing. The wearable parts were kind of going out, and that is why I switched away from it. And after 5 years, I was kind of ready to try a different type of truck. As far as camping setups with that truck go, though, when I first started, I just had basically a bone stock Xterra. I put a little lift and some 33-inch tires on it, and I loaded up the back with gear that I already had, right? And that is one recommendation that I will always make to you guys, especially if you're newer, is don't feel like you have to do what all the YouTubers do. Don't feel like you have to match all the Instagram people, right? You don't have to have all the fancy gear. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars to get out and enjoy nature and camp. Now, if you want to go on longer and longer overlanding trips, of course, there is going to be some gear that is either needed or at least makes your trips a lot better. Like a refrigerator can improve your trip because you can take cold drinks with you. You can take food with you. You can make better food when you're out in the middle of nowhere. So there are some things that you may want to consider as you get further along. But again, go back on my podcast, listen to some of the earlier stuff, because a lot of that stuff talks about what do you really need and what you don't need, how to get into it, beginner overlanding 101. There's definitely some stuff there for you. So that first Xterra setup was really about just throwing a tent in the back, throwing a sleeping bag and a pillow in the back, and getting out and exploring. I hit the national forest. I started to learn how to find dispersed spots. I learned what the rules were. There's a ton of stuff to learn from that. And one place that is a great resource for that is Newbie Overlanders, which I'll link in the description down below. That's a group that I run on Facebook that has about 20,000 people in it. And everyone is mostly new, or they're experienced people that are just tired of the bullying from the big group. So they came to this group, and we all try and help each other get out and find new spots and new ways to explore nature. But so that first setup, those first few times that I went out camping in the Xterra, I would, again, take like a $50 Coleman pop-up ground tent. And I took my $40 Coleman 0 degree bag, which that's a misnomer. It's definitely not a 0 degree bag. It was not intended for cold temperatures. It was very miserable in the winter and fall. But I just got out there. I threw up that tent. I threw, like a foam pad on the ground, put my sleeping bag on top of it and a pillow, and it worked fine. Was it the most comfortable? No. Did my back hurt the next morning when I woke up? Oftentimes, yes. So that was, how I started. But I got out. I kind of learned what I liked. I learned that, like, in my case, I'm not a gourmet chef, right? I don't necessarily want to come to the woods and cook a 4-course meal or 7-course meal or anything like that. I like freeze-dried meals. I like picking up stuff at the gas station and bringing it with me. I like stopping and getting food on the way, right? So for me, I didn't have a big need for a bunch of kitchen stuff. And that is kind of how you learn, right? Same with your camping setup. So I liked the tent and I liked the small footprint and the ease of like taking it in and out of my truck because it was my daily driver. So being able to remove the stuff from the back of the Xterra, use the Xterra for my family, for hauling stuff, getting mulch and stuff in the spring when I needed to, was really, really nice. However, the more that I got into it, the more that I kind of realized I really like this stuff, right? I really like camping. I really like overlanding. I want to do more of it. So that was at the point where I decided, what, the ground tent, it is okay, but it hurts my back. Maybe I should get a cot, right? So that was kind of the next iteration was keep the same setup that I had, evolve a little bit, get a cot. I bought a Coleman cot. I'll put links to all this stuff in the description down below if you're looking for any of this stuff, just to make finding it really easy. But I got a Coleman cot. It was really inexpensive. It was a little bit tricky to put together, but it worked just fine. And it made my back hurt a lot less. It made me more comfortable. I was up off the ground. So if it did rain and kind of come through the bottom of the tent, it wasn't the end of the world. I wasn't wet the next morning. So the cot was the next iteration. But guess what happened then? The more stuff that you start to bring with you, the more stuff that you have to pack and unpack, the more chance that you're going to forget something, the less room that you have in the vehicle. So when my kids wanted to go, we were packed to the gills to take pillows and sleeping bags and 2 tents and a cot for me and a cot for the wife and all this stuff, air mattresses and everything else. So, eventually that had to go away. So the more that I got pinched for space, the more work that I had to do to pack and unpack things, the more I realized I don't really want to mess with this. Like I really like overlanding. I like camping, but I want it to be as simple and straightforward and easy as possible so that I can just get out and enjoy. And a lot of the times too, for me anyways, and this may or may not be the same for you, but I'm throwing it out there so that you kind of know why this influenced my path. For me, it wasn't that I could plan super far in advance, right? So like it might be Wednesday, Thursday afternoon, and my wife I might say, hey, are we doing anything this weekend? And she may be like, actually, no, we don't have kids sports and we don't have anything. And I'd be like, hey, can I go camping? Or can I go on a 2-day overlanding trip and go explore some new national forests or something? And she'd be like, sure. And then I'm like, oh crap, I have to like make a spreadsheet. I have to make a list. I need to make sure I don't forget anything important. I need a toilet. I need my tent. I need my cot. I need my sleeping bag, my pad. I need all this stuff, right? There was just so much stuff and it was all out of the vehicle and had to be packed every time I wanted to go. So that was kind of the pro, right? The pro is you can take the stuff out. The con is that then you have to repack everything. You have to be aware of everything. You can't forget anything or your trip is going to suck. So that was what kind of pushed me away from that, was that I wanted to do it more and more. I wanted to be ready to go. At the same time, I had tried hammock camping a little bit. I'd been a hammock camper before I'd ever gotten into overlanding, and I liked it, but it's a little bit limiting in winter. You got to, again, bring a bunch more stuff. It's just, you got to have trees that are placed the right distance apart. There's some limiting factors with hammock camping too that kind of cause the same issues for me. And again, you had to pack everything every single trip. So my next iteration was I actually bought the cheapest rooftop tent I could find on Amazon. It was about $1,000. It was called the Raptor series. This thing was fine. The cover was the worst part. Putting the cover on and off, it was kind of like an elastic banded cover. And I go a lot in the fall and the winter. So when your hands are frozen and it's 6 o'clock in the morning and you're trying to pack up and your fingers don't work and you have to go all around your truck 8 times to get that thing pulled down, that was the downside. That was the con of that cheap tent that I bought first. The pro of it though was I could keep some bedding in it. I could keep a pillow in it. I had all my stuff ready to go. It was on top of the truck, so it freed up a bunch of space inside the truck for more gear, for being able to take other stuff, for being able to take my kids and their pillows and sleeping bags and an extra tent for them so that we could all go camping whenever we wanted to. And again, it was ready to go. So that was a really nice pro, is that the thing is just always on the truck. It's always ready to go. I get to camp, I set up, and I'm ready to sleep. But so from that rooftop tent experience, I did discover and confirm that I'm a rooftop tent person, right? I like being in a rooftop tent. I like being up away from the bugs, up away from the animals. I like the cleanliness of it because you can take your shoes off before you get in and out versus a ground tent. Sometimes it's pouring down rain. You have to go in there, you get rain and dirt and everything in it. The tent's dirty. So I did confirm, even though that rooftop tent wasn't the best setup, for me, the rooftop tents were the way that I wanted to go. So then next from there, I got a wedge style rooftop tent. Now, this was a great wedge style rooftop tent from a company called Rugged Bound. It was a cool looking tent. It was, wedge style back before these things were so popular and you could get, 100 different variations of this thing. And it worked fine. The only bad thing with that was it leaked a little bit. So then I was having like leaking problems. Water was inside the tent, which obviously is not ideal. That's the reason that I got rid of that. And then I moved on to another wedge style tent. But so again, then rooftop tent was the way for me. I like the flexibility of it. I like the fast setup, the fast teardown, especially of a wedge style tent. No soft covers to deal with. No, very few awning poles, very few latches to deal with. The only downside then of the wedge style tent is the wedge shape itself. So in that, cramped foot area, your feet are you either have to sleep at a diagonal or your feet are kind of crunched into the wedge part of the tent, which is why I have now switched to this open road tent that has the extra X hinge at the bottom that opens up about 10 inches or so of extra space for your feet at the bottom of it. But again, it's a progression, right? As I went through this, I really figured out that rooftop tents were for me. If you are thinking about this stuff, one, you have to be okay with the investment, right? Rooftop tents are very expensive. That is a con of rooftop tents. They're very expensive. There are a lot of options nowadays that are less expensive. I've done videos on the Nature Nest. I've done videos on this open road. They're, $2,000, $2,500 or less is really easy. There are even some like the Wildfinder that I've done a video on that's about $1,000. So anywhere from about the 800 to 1,500 range is pretty easy. In the $2,000 to 2,500 range gets you some really nice features like this X hinge, things like that. Really good quality tents for that money too. But again, you have to decide, is that something you want to deal with? Do you want to spend that kind of money? Do you want something that is external to your vehicle that can hold your bedding and stuff, that allows you to get set up and torn down really quick, but also allows you to get out and go camping quicker and more easily than having to pack everything in and out of your vehicle every single time you want to go? Now, another thing to think about when I say setup is not just your sleeping arrangements, right? It may also be your vehicle's modifications. My second overlanding vehicle after the Xterra and before the 2023 Frontier was an '08 Frontier that is what they call Titan swapped. Basically what that means is it has the suspension components, the CVs, the axles out of a full-size Nissan Titan. So it made it wider, it made it taller. I had 35-inch tires on that, and that truck is super capable. It can go pretty much anywhere. It can go over a ton of obstacles, and it was very, very capable with a rear locker. It was awesome, but I got 10 miles to the gallon. So daily driving that truck, it had no sway bars, so it was a little bit sketchy feeling. It would definitely kind of go back and forth. Kind of flounder back and forth in roundabouts. It was a little bit scary to drive on the road. Again, it got 10 miles to the gallon, so there was some expense related to that. If I had to drive somewhere, I was going to be getting worse gas mileage. If I took a long trip, I was going to be spending a lot on gas. I was going to be kind of a limiting factor for the group. We would have to stop a lot to get gas. But I loved the truck. It was great. Having that sort of capability is really fun too, like going places like the Daniel Boone Backcountry Byway in Kentucky and being able to do some of those really fun, really challenging trails was a lot of fun. It was awesome. And I really liked that truck. I still have that truck to this day. I'm working to sell it a little bit now on the side. So if you're interested, hit me up. I do have a guy that's really interested that I'm talking to that is probably going to buy it. But that truck was fantastic. But the pros of it are really super capable. It can definitely show up a lot of other vehicles like Land Cruisers, Jeeps, that kind of thing. It was very impressive from a capability standpoint. But the cons are bad fuel efficiency, right? Bigger tires are more expensive, more maintenance, more things to go wrong, less of a quality good daily driver. So there were definitely some downsides from a daily driving standpoint. So think about all those things in your setup, right? Do you have to daily drive this vehicle, or is it an extra vehicle? If it's an extra vehicle and you want to do really tricky trails and you want to go to off-road parks and treat it like a toy, then maybe you want something that's more capable with a bigger lift and bigger tires. If you have to daily it, which I'll get to here in a second with my new truck, I went with a small lift in 33, so it didn't really hurt my gas mileage more than a few miles per gallon. It's not a huge difference. The truck still has sway bars. It still does really well on-road as well as off-road, and it's just been really nice. But you want to think about that stuff, right? How much are you going to daily drive it? How much are you going to take it on trails? Is it your only vehicle? Is it a second vehicle? All that stuff will have an impact on what your setup is going to be. You also want to think about things like a rooftop tent from a weight standpoint. So on that '08 Frontier that I had, because it was so tall, because it was on big tires, having a big heavy rooftop tent up really high on a roof rack also meant that it was a little bit tippy, right? It was a little bit top heavy. So on some off camber stuff off road, it felt kind of sketchy sometimes. There were definitely times where I felt a little uncomfortable with the amount of tipping that the vehicle was doing because of all that weight up high. In that case, maybe it does make more sense to have stuff down in the bed of your truck, to go with like a Gazelle or some sort of a ground tent. Even if it's not your ideal sleeping situation, you want to think about the type of trips you want to take, the type of trails you want to hit, the type of wheeling that you want to do. If you want to be really super aggressive, you don't want all that weight up top. Probably you want it down lower. Maybe something like a trailer would be okay, but then, a trailer also has pros and cons as far as it makes it a little bit trickier to do obstacles. It's harder to drag that thing behind you. It's also going to decrease your gas mileage, right? So literally every single decision that you make related to outfitting your vehicle for overlanding or camping is going to have a positive and a negative impact on your trips and on your daily life, right? So you just really have to think about that stuff. And again, I have changed my setup probably 8-10 times in the last 9 years or so. And each time I got really excited. I watched a bunch of videos on YouTube. I saw a bunch of cool pictures on Instagram. I Googled and researched and did all the research on different vehicle equipment manufacturers and different manufacturers for suspension and stuff. And then I went and bought the thing. And then I didn't learn my lesson until after I had tried it. I didn't think about the repercussions of buying a big truck on 35s and how bad the gas mileage would be and how bad it would be to drive, around town to go to work. So that's, again, the purpose of this episode is to kind of break this stuff down for you, to kind of try and download some of my experience to you to save you time, money, effort when you're thinking about your build. And it doesn't have to be a new build either, right? If you've had a few trucks and you're kind of thinking the same thing that I'm mentioning here, like, yeah, I wasted a bunch of money. I bought this thing and I didn't like it. I bought that and I didn't like it. Again, that's what I hope that this episode will do, is give you some information that will help you think through those things and make a good decision for your next step, your next build. All right, so we've talked about the Xterra, ground tent camping, hammock camping, early rooftop tent camping, non-wedge style, wedge style rooftop tent camping, and how I finally kind of have zeroed in on this, right? So that brings us now to my current truck. Now, this is a 2023 Nissan Frontier Pro 4X. The reason that I went with this is, again, my Xterra was very, very old. It was an 05. Then I went to an 08, 5 years later. So it was basically about the same age as my Xterra was when I bought it, but a few years later and a few years newer truck on the Frontier. I did have, unfortunately, some mechanical issues with that truck because the previous owner messed some stuff up on it. Wasn't a huge problem. They were all fixable. It was like catalytic converters and things like that. But it definitely foiled some trips for me. And then that really made me start thinking, right? So if you're thinking new vehicle versus used vehicle, this part of the podcast is going to be important for you. It was sort of a conundrum to me, right? I wanted that capability. I wanted something really unique and cool and different from everybody else, but I was doing that at the expense of reliability, right? And for me, once I missed a couple of the trips that I really wanted to go on because the truck's axle broke, or because, and it always seemed to happen like the day of the trip. So whenever that happened a couple times, then I was like, you know what? This truck is really cool. It's really unique. It's really fun. I'm not a mechanic. I'm pretty mechanically inclined, but basic stuff, I'm definitely not fixing a broken axle day of. I don't have the parts, right? And missing those trips to me was not worth having the cooler, bigger, giant, crazy truck, right? And again, that truck looks awesome. And when people that know what it is see it, they're like, holy crap, that's Titan swapped. It's really cool. It looks awesome. This thing looks more stock, right? It's a 1.5 to 2 inch lift from All Dogs Off-Road with 33-inch tires on it. I still think it looks really cool. I think that it looks really aggressive, and I love this truck, but it's definitely way tamed down from the old version of the old truck that I had. So you got to think about that too, right? Like, people call some people Foverlanders, or they say that they're just doing it for the looks. I'm not gonna lie, I don't hate when people walk up to me and go, what's that? Or, I don't hate that stuff, but I also don't really care. I don't do it for that. Sometimes it's kind of annoying when you go to a gas station or you go to a grocery store and people are just constantly asking you questions, or like wanting you to open the fridge and pull it down and show them that stuff. I don't really do it for that, but I do like it when I see someone else on the road that is, outfitted and kind of give them the wave and stuff like that. But that's not the reason that I do it, right? I'm okay with the truck looking like that for the benefit of being able to, again, like today, hop out and just go to the woods and camp for a night. But that is something you want to think about, right? Are you willing to have a vehicle that looks very much like a purpose-built rig? If not, then you want to change your setup. You may not want the rooftop tent. You may not want all that stuff. You may want like a drawer system or something that's kind of enclosed on the inside and kind of secret. You may want to build, take an SUV and build in a sleeping platform and make it kind of a sleeper or a stealth type build, right? If you don't want it to be super obvious. If you have to drive downtown into a big city every day, you may want it to not look like it's packed full of expensive gear, right? So all those things are considerations when you're building a truck. Again, kind of bringing this full circle and coming to the current truck and talking about why I'm going with this setup, and then talking about my future changes that I'm planning to make to the truck and why I'm going to make those changes. That's what I'm going to touch on now. But again, I went to this because I wanted the reliability. I wanted a new truck with, it's brand new. So I bought it with like 7 miles on it. I have warranty on it and stuff for a few years. So if anything major goes wrong, I'm covered. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to do driveway fixes and stuff like that. I can take it to a dealership. I can get it fixed. But it's been great. I've taken it to Wyoming, Kentucky, West Virginia, Virginia, all over the place, right? Michigan, Wisconsin, everywhere, all over the country. And I put about 24,000 miles on it now in the last couple of years. And it's just been awesome. And it's really nice to know that all the history is mine. If anything goes wrong, it's my fault. It's something I've screwed up. I know every modification that's been done to the truck. I know everything about it. I get reliability. I get improved gas mileage. I was able to not Titan swap this truck, not make it super crazy and big and built, but still pretty capable, not as capable as the old truck, right? But pretty capable, but still a decent daily driver. And it's more in line with where I'm at in my life with my family and all that sort of thing. And it's something that I can use for fun, but then I can also, it's a 4-door. I can throw my kids and their friends in the back and take them to swimming, right? So, you learn and things will change and evolve too as you go. So you need to be ready for that. You're not just probably going to build a truck and then just keep it for the next 20 years. Things are probably going to change. So be prepared for that. But again, if you can get ahead of it, if you can really think through what's coming, where you think your brain is going to be at in a few years, then you can make decisions based on that instead of what is the hot thing in the moment, right? So that is going to do it for this episode. Again, I hope that was helpful. I know that was a lot, kind of a ton of history and a ton of experience and stuff kind of dumped on you. But I wanted to get all that out there and kind of walk you guys through my experience and again, the pros and the cons and kind of why I did the different things that I did and why I'm arriving at this. To wrap this up, my new setup is going to be a cap. So I plan to go to an enclosed cap. I'm kind of tired of my fridge being dirty all the time, all my gear getting dirty in the back. This drawer system that I built, I really, really like it. It's been great for the last couple of years. It worked great for Wyoming, but it takes up a ton of space. It's really, really heavy. And I can't really use my bed. When I need to access my electrical, it's all behind the box. So I have to literally take all my drawers out of the truck to be able to work on my electrical. I want everything to be open but enclosed in the back here. I want more security. So I don't want everything strapped to the outside of the truck. It's all going to be in the cap so it can be secured. I can park in a parking lot without worrying about coming out and having my chainsaw or my axe or something be gone or taken off the truck, right? So there are some security things there. But so that is the new setup for me. I have learned that open bed rack is nice. It is less expensive than a cap. So, but long run, if you think I'm going to want to have more security, I need to park downtown. I need to, I have things where I need to be able to close everything up and lock it and not have anybody be able to access anything in the bed of my truck. Then you may want to just save yourself the heartache and all that effort of building a bed rack, putting that in, mounting up a rooftop tent, hooking up electronics, doing all that stuff, when you could just save up a little bit longer and go straight for the cap. So that is my next setup. I think I hope that will be my ultimate sort of setup, is a truck with 4 doors for my kids and my family, with an enclosed cap for security, for cleanliness of all my gear and stuff, to again be able to have everything ready to go whenever I'm ready to go on a trip without having to pack very much. That is my goal, and that is my desire with this truck, and that's where I'm going with it. So again, I hope that was helpful for you. If it was and you're on YouTube, click that like button. If you're on the podcast, leave a 5-star review. That means a ton to me. It helps other people find the podcast. It helps them see that it's a good one. Add it to your favorites. Also, if you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. There's tons of content that comes out on YouTube. If you're on the podcast, you might want to hop over to YouTube too, because I do a bunch of other videos and stuff besides just the podcast. So would love to have you over there as well. And then trying to keep the endings of these things shorter. The description down below is going to have all the information. It's going to have my social channels. It has a link to my website where I've got funny overlanding camping themed patches and stickers. So if you want some of that stuff, there's a store link down there. All my featured partners are in the description below, and there are some awesome companies. These aren't necessarily people that pay me. They're just a bunch of companies that I've worked with or I have their gear and I really, really like it. So definitely check out the featured partners down below. And then, of course, if you're on YouTube, there's a join button below this. That's a passive way to support the channel. There's also a link to the Patreon group, which is a more active way to be involved. We do a 24/7 Discord. We chat all the time. It's a ton of fun. And then there's the Newbie Overlander Facebook group that I mentioned. Awesome group of people, super helpful. So if you want to kind of learn more about overlanding and not be bullied, check that out. But again, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.